Welcome to the fourth and final video of Unit 8. In this video, we are going to cover the geography and religions, as well as the political and social structures of the different empires in the Americas. In this video, we will cover the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca. Mesoamerica is a term you should be familiar with. It means the area extending from Mexico to Honduras, where the ancient empires of the Aztecs and the Mayans developed. So on this map here, you see this is a zoomed out version. The green area is what is classified as Mesoamerica. Much of what is known about Aztec, Maya, and Inca culture comes from codices. A codex is a collection of writings in book form. This word is typically used when referring to collections of laws. So a lot of what we know about these different groups is because it was written down in book form. So we're going to talk about the differences between these three civilizations. And we're going to begin with the Aztecs. So on this map, the green area does represent the area covered by the Aztec Empire. It was located in an arid or dry valley in central Mexico. Arid means dry. Right here is the city of Tenochtitlan, which is right on Lake Texcoco, and that is going to be the capital of the Aztec Empire. So again, capital city of Tenochtitlan. It is built in the middle of a lake, and the way that they do that is they're actually going to create their own land in the middle of this lake. We'll take a closer look at exactly how they did that in a video during class time, but this would be a representation of what that would look like. Politically, rulers of the Aztec Empire were emperors. They were expected to lead in battle, not sit back and watch others fight for them. Montezuma was a very famous emperor of the Aztecs. The Aztec Empire conquered neighboring states and collected tribute money. Tribute is payment made to ensure peace between tribes at war. So tribute, we've seen the term before, is where areas that are conquered are given the chance to pay or provide resources to the Aztecs, and in turn, the Aztecs are not going to continue to attack them. Religiously, the Aztecs were polytheistic. As a reminder, polytheistic means belief in many gods. The sun god was the major god that was worshipped, but there were many. They did practice human sacrifice in their religious ceremonies, and priests also held political power, not just religious power. So there was a strong connection between religion and politics. Religious ceremonies were very large events, very important events. So this here is a depiction of a heart being cut out as a sacrifice to the sun god. Captured enemies were often sacrificed to the gods, specifically because the sun god was the most important god to the Aztecs. That is what is depicted here. And their hearts would be cut out with an obsidian knife. Obsidian is a hard black volcanic glass. Knives were used for a lot of different things by the Aztecs, including for hunting, for fishing, for things like that. But highly decorated ones, like the one shown here, where there's so much artistic skill that went into creating the handle here, those were specifically used for ceremonies. Blood to the Aztecs was known as a very powerful life substance, an important part of the time and nature being all connected to one another. This blade, the one that is shown on the screen here, was created in 1400 CE or AD. Schools were created for warriors and for priests. Stone temples were created. Metalwork was very important. Pottery was a very popular thing to be created. The Aztecs borrowed the Mayan calendar, which maintained 365 days, and there was no written language associated with the Aztecs. Their trade was largely local trade. Their economy relied on agriculture for the most part. Corn was very important to them, one of the major things that they produced. peppers, hemp, tobacco, all of those would also be produced by the Aztecs or traded with other areas near them. Later, Spain will exploit the empire and use the Atlantic Ocean for trade. Next, we'll talk about the Mayan Empire, which is located very close to the Aztec Empire. The Mayan Empire is located on the Yucatan Peninsula, just south of where the Aztec Empire was located. This is in southern Mexico, in an area that is dense rainforest and jungle. So this here is the Yucatan Peninsula. Peninsula, again, meaning surrounded by water on 3 sides. Chichen Itza is a very important, famous site for the Mayans. It is located on the Yucatan Peninsula. El Castillo, meaning the castle, is the most famous pyramid shown here, dedicated to the god Kukulkan, who was the feathered serpent god. Politically, the Mayans were not a unified empire. Unified means part of one. It was numerous city-states instead, each with their own king who shared a common culture. The last time we saw an area that had numerous city-states with their own leadership was when we talked about Greece. Good examples, Sparta and Athens. Very different societies, but within the same area, just different city-states. So this is the same makeup in the Mayan-controlled region. They had the only fully developed written language in the Americas, and the empire was ruled by warrior priests. Now, their language was written in hieroglyphics, which had thousands of different symbols, some that represented sounds and others that represented meanings. Many different languages existed within the Maya because they were separated city-states, but only a handful were ever written. And the hieroglyphics was the major way that things were written down for the Maya. So this here is an example of writing that came from the Maya. It is a block of writing that was found and decoded. The Mayan Empire was in a state of decline by around 1100 AD or CE. We're not exactly sure what led to their downfall. Possible reasons could include ecological damage, meaning clear cutting of trees. It could include peasant revolts. It could include disease or even invasion by foreign tribes. Religiously, as I stated earlier, they were polytheistic, meaning belief in many gods. They also practiced human sacrifice, largely in times of drought, trying to entice the gods or convince the gods, ask the gods for rain. They focused on the movements of the planets quite a bit. Agriculturally, they grew a lot of their own crops. They traded in specialized goods, like everything listed here. These are examples of some of the goods that they traded in. Some things that they produced or found or mined and were able to trade with other civilizations or empires. For example, the Aztecs. The Mayan calendar was based on advanced observations of the stars. You may have heard of the Mayan calendar in popular culture in recent years because the Mayan calendar was believed to end in 2012, the last date on the calendar. And so there were a lot of popular culture theories about what that meant, if it meant the end of the world. So it is more familiar in popular culture today than it might have been otherwise. But this was a very, very advanced form of telling time, of keeping the movement of time. This is just a joke, obviously based on the Mayan calendar ending in 2012. The Mayans traded with nearby tribes like the Aztecs, and they were later exploited or taken advantage of by the Spanish. The final civilization we'll talk about here in the Americas is the Incan Empire. So this empire existed in South America in that purple region on the map. So the western side of South America. Located in South America in the Andes Mountains. So the empire is actually quite split up by the mountains. There are cities up in the tops of the mountains as well as in the valleys, and so travel between the different cities is going to be difficult. It covers about 400,000 square miles, a population of about 12 million, and it occupied present-day Peru, Argentina, Ecuador, and Chile. Politically, there were provinces ruled by governors, but the empire was ruled by a single emperor. The emperor was viewed as if he were a god. The reason that provinces were ruled by governors is because, again, these mountains made it very difficult for one person to control the entire region because it took so long to travel from one place to another. So the emperor was in charge, was seen as a god, but the governors had to rule the day-to-day. They had an elaborate or very advanced communication system between their isolated mountain cities that depended on road systems. They did have paved roads, but it was not allowed for regular people to use the roads. The roads were only meant to be used by people transporting news. They were known as road runners. And they would use a relay system. So one person would be responsible for sending news from one city to the next, but if that information had to be sent further on, a different road runner would be given that information and sent to the next city with it. So it's kind of like telephone, if you've ever played that game, where one person gives the line or the story or the information to another, and another, and so on. One of the major cities was located at Machu Picchu. Now, this is not the capital city. However, it is one of the best preserved cities, and so we were able to learn the most about the Incan Empire from the city of Machu Picchu. So if you take a look at this map here, Machu Picchu is located up in the Andes Mountains here. Cusco is the capital city of the Incan Empire. Quipus are an interesting concept that was developed by the Incans. This is how they kept track of trade and the goods that they took from conquered lands. So what they would do is this was how they counted. This is how they kept records. They would have these strings, and what they would do is they would tie knots in them, and the different knots represented different numbers. So the top knots up here on each of these would represent the hundreds space. This would represent the tens space, and this would represent the ones space. And based on how many knots were in that section would tell you the number that you would go for. So the fact that there are 4 knots in the top here, 1 in the middle, and 7 on the bottom means that represented 417. This was a very creative way of keeping track of resources. Religiously, the Incan Empire practiced polytheism. The sun god was a major god for the Incas as well. And as we saw with the other 2 civilizations that we've talked about, human sacrifice was also practiced. They had mines where they were able to mine copper, tin, gold, and stone. This is largely because they were located in the mountains. They were big on astronomy, so studying the stars, engineering, and medicine. Anesthetics and brain surgery were 2 things that they focused on in terms of medicine. The way that they did farming was really advanced. It's called terrace farming, where land is divided for growing different crops in upper and lower elevations. This was important because they were in the mountains and they still needed to farm. They farmed largely maize or corn, which is native to the Americas. And the way that terrace farming works, you can see in this image here, the different levels would each be growing different crops. And again, this allowed for farming up in the mountains. Finally, the Incas had the trade routes, which if you look at the map, all of those different lines represent those trade routes. And later, Spain conquered the Incas and used the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans to their advantage. This is the end of the video on the Americas and the end of Unit 8 notes.